I spent 40 years fixing cracked pipes, thinking I could mend anything. But you can't patch a broken son who cuts your locks just to sell your soul for cheap.
You losing your mind, old man? With a brain like that, it's about time you called it quits. Barnaby didn't even look up. He just kept scrolling on his brand new iPhone, completely brushing off my plea for $10,000 to get my leg operated on. He had no idea that under the table, the blood clot in my right calf was throbbing like hot needles. But that pain was nothing compared to what I found in my workshop. The heavy-duty padlock to my tool chest had been clean-cut by the exact pair of rigid cutters I'd gifted him. My Metrotech ultrasonic leak detector, my absolute lifeline, was gone, pawned off, and in its place, a mountain of black market debt dumped right on my shoulders, all secured with my forged signature. My only son, the boy I broke my back to raise, was systematically stripping me of my livelihood and my dignity. What do you do when your body is failing you and the monster trying to ruin your life is your own flesh and blood? Would you take this lying down, or would you fight back? Hit subscribe to see how this unfolds, and let me know what you would do in the comments. 5 in the morning in northeast Portland always feels like you are breathing in wet wool. The rain was drumming its usual rhythm on the cedar shingles of the roof, steady, grey, and completely relentless. I dragged my right leg across the linoleum kitchen floor, gripping the edge of the laminate countertop as a sharp, white-hot spasm tore through my calf. Deep vein thrombosis. The doctor at Penn Medicine had used a lot of fancy words, but it boiled down to one simple thing. My blood was turning to sludge in my veins. If I didn't get the $10,000 surgery soon, the leg was going to go bad. I poured myself a mug of black coffee, no sugar. The heat from the mug was the only warm thing in the house. Barnaby came down the stairs 15 minutes later, already dressed in a crisp button-down, smelling of expensive cologne that did not belong in a house that smelled like damp pine and copper pipes. He was staring at his phone, his thumb flicking across the screen like a metronome. "Morning, Barnaby." "Hey." He did not look up. He opened the fridge, grabbed the orange juice, and drank straight from the carton. I watched him. 10 years ago, when his mother passed, I swore I would make sure he never felt like he was lacking anything. I worked double shifts, crawled through crawl spaces filled with sewage, and bent my spine until it stayed curved just so he could go to college. "Barnaby, I need to talk to you about that doctor's appointment." He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, still staring at his screen. "Yeah? What about it?" "The surgery. Penn Medicine called back. They have an opening next Thursday. I need to put down 10 grand to lock in the specialist. I was thinking, that startup money I lent you last year, the 15 grand for your tech portfolio, if you could just cash out 10 of it, just for a couple of months." Barnaby finally looked up. His eyes were flat, impatient, the same look he gave the old toaster when it burned his bread. "Are you serious, Dad? Right now?" "I need the surgery, son. My leg is swelling up to the knee. I can barely get my work boots on." "Dad, you don't just cash out of a high-yield venture portfolio because you have a medical bill. That money is locked in a 5-year maturity structure. Liquidating it now means I forfeit the entire yield curve. It's basically financial suicide. It's my leg, Barnaby. And it's my future, Dad. You said that money was an investment in my career. Now you want me to just throw away all my leverage because of a routine procedure. There are payment plans. Use your insurance. My insurance doesn't cover the out-of-network specialist, and you know it. Well, then find another doctor, or wait a few months. Capital markets are volatile right now. I can't just pull 10 grand out of thin air. It's not sitting in a coffee tin under your bed, Dad. That's not how the world works anymore." He set the orange juice down, grabbed his leather briefcase, and walked out the front door without another word. The slam of the door rattled the old glass panes. The next afternoon, the rain had stopped, leaving the driveway slick with rotten maple leaves. I was sitting on the porch, a bag of frozen peas pressed against my throbbing calf, trying to ignore the dull ache that reached all the way to my hip. A sleek black rideshare pulled up. Barnaby stepped out. He wasn't wearing his usual work clothes. He was carrying a large garment bag with a gold zipper and a heavy paper shopping bag with the Nordstrom logo. In his other hand, he held a sleek, gold-colored phone. He was laughing, talking into a pair of wireless earbuds. "Yeah, Gemma. No. Tell your dad I booked the private dining room at Castagna. Thursday night. It's all set. Right. Love you." He tapped his earbud to disconnect. A smug grin plastered across his face. "Is that a new phone, Barnaby?" He didn't even flinch. He walked up the porch steps, tossing the Nordstrom bag onto the wooden bench. "Oh yeah, iPhone 15 Pro Max. Had to upgrade. The analytics apps I run at the bank were lagging on my old one. It's a business expense, Dad. Must have cost a pretty penny. $1,200. Plus the data plan. But you gotta look the part if you want to play the part. Especially with Gemma's dad coming to town." He unzipped the garment bag, revealing a charcoal grey wool suit. He ran his hand down the lapel, his face practically glowing. "Hugo Boss. $3,000, but Gemma's dad is a high-end contractor. He doesn't want his future son-in-law looking like he buys his clothes off the rack at Sears. You have to spend money to make money, Dad." I stared at the $3,000 suit. I stared at the brand-new gold. $10,000 was financial suicide. But $3,000 for a suit was an investment. I didn't say a word. I just stood up, the bag of frozen peas sliding off my leg and hitting the porch floor with a soft thud. I walked inside. By 6 in the evening, the Portland fog had rolled in, thick and cold. I had a night shift call-out in West Hills. A clogged main line in some rich guy's basement. I needed the money, swollen leg or not. I grabbed my heavy canvas jacket and walked out to the backyard. My workshop was a converted, detached garage at the back of the property. The door was solid oak, reinforced with steel plates, secured by a heavy brass master lock. I reached into my pocket for the key, but as I got closer, my flashlight beam caught something wrong. The lock wasn't hanging straight. I stepped closer, my heart doing a slow, heavy thud in my chest. The solid brass shackle of the lock had been cut completely in two. The metal was bright and shiny where the blades had bitten through. It wasn't jimmied or pried. It was a clean, perfect 45-degree cut. I knew that cut. I'd seen it thousands of times. It was the exact angle left by a rigid 15A heavy-duty pipe cutter. The hardened steel wheels on that cutter could slice through thick copper, steel, or brass like butter if you applied enough leverage. I had bought that exact tool for Barnaby on his 21st birthday when he talked about wanting to learn the trade before he got seduced by the banking world. My hands were shaking as I pushed the heavy oak door open. The workshop smelled of damp earth and WD-40. I didn't look at the copper pipe racks or the heavy wrenches. I walked straight to the steel cabinet bolted to the back wall. The door was slightly ajar. Inside, the custom-molded black leather case for my Metrotech UT99281X ultrasonic leak detector was sitting on the shelf. I reached out, grabbed the handle, and lifted it. It was too light. Way too light. I popped the heavy metal latches. The red foam lining inside was empty. The high-frequency microphone, the aluminum sensor rods, the digital display unit, $12,000 of specialized German engineering. Gone. The machine that had paid for our food, our mortgage, and Barnaby's college tuition. Gone. I walked back into the main house, the empty leather case heavy in my left hand. My right leg was screaming in protest. But I barely felt it. Barnaby was in the living room, standing in front of the hallway mirror, adjusting the shoulders of his new charcoal suit. He looked slick. He looked like $1,000,000. He saw me in the mirror. He saw the empty case in my hand. His shoulders stiffened for a fraction of a second. Then he turned around, his face completely smooth. "Going to work, Dad?" "Where is it, Barnaby?" "Where is what?" "My Metrotech, the ultrasonic locator. It's gone from the cabinet." He let out a short, dry laugh, turning back to the mirror to adjust his tie. Oh, that old thing? How should I know? You probably left it at that commercial site on Sandy Boulevard last week. I told you, Dad, your memory is slipping. You really need to stop taking these night shifts. It's getting embarrassing. The lock on the shed was cut with a rigid 15A cutter, Barnaby. The one I gave you, the one you keep in your car trunk. He spun around, his eyes narrowing, his voice losing its polished corporate edge. Are you accusing me of stealing your garbage, Dad? Seriously? I work at a bank. I deal with millions of dollars. Why would I want some greasy, outdated plumbing tool? You're losing your mind, old man. With a brain like that, it's about time you called it quits. He stepped closer, towering over me, his breath smelling of mints and expensive whiskey. He tapped his fingers hard against my chest, right over my heart. You keep pushing this, and Gemma's family is going to start asking questions about why my dad is acting like a senile lunatic. I won't let you ruin this for me. You got that? I looked at my son. I looked at the boy I thought I knew. And then, my phone buzzed in my pocket. A text message from an unknown number. I pulled it out with a numb hand. The message was just one sentence. Your first payment of $1,500 on your online payday loan is now 24 hours past due. The glowing screen of my phone felt like a hot coal in my palm. $15,000. An online payday loan taken out in my name. I stared at the numbers until they blurred into grey streaks. The message didn't care about my swelling leg, or the cold Portland fog outside, or the fact that I'd never touched an online lending app in my life. It just wanted its first $1,500 pound of flesh. Down the hall, Barnaby's bedroom door clicked shut. The quiet murmur of his voice drifted through the thin drywall. He was probably still talking to Gemma, or planning another $3,000 investment in his wardrobe. My knee buckled slightly as I stood up, a dull, sickening ache radiating from my right calf. I leaned against the kitchen counter, my knuckles turning white. I wanted to march down that hall. I wanted to shake him by his expensive wool collar until his teeth rattled. But 40 years of fixing high-pressure steam lines teaches you one thing. If you blow your top when the pressure rises, you get scaled to death. I went to my bedroom, shut the door, and dialed a number I knew by heart. Rod? It's Thad. The phone rang 3 times before a gravelly voice answered. Rod Miller had spent 30 years on the Portland police force before his joints gave out. He knew the dark underbelly of this city better than anyone. Thad, you calling from work? You sound rough, buddy. I sat on the edge of my mattress, keeping my voice down to a harsh whisper. Rod, someone took out a $15,000 payday loan using my social security number. The first payment is past due. They've got my address, everything. There was a long silence on the other end. I could hear the faint scratch of Rod's lighter, then the heavy exhale of smoke. Payday lenders. They don't do deep background checks, Thad. Just a name, a tax form, and a signature. You got any idea who had access to your paperwork? My chest felt tight. My tax forms, my old W-2s from my contracting days, they were kept in a metal filing box in the hallway closet. The key was always in the ceramic bowl by the front door. It's Barnaby, Rod. It has to be. My Metrotech leak detector is gone too. Broken lock on the shed. He used a pipe cutter to do it. Jesus, Thad. Rod's voice dropped an octave, losing its friendly tone, switching back to the old detective. You confront him yet? I tried. He told me I was lancing my own brain. Said I was getting senile. Forgot where I left the machine. He looked me right in the eye and lied, Rod. My own boy. Listen to me, Thad. Do not go after him. Not yet. You go off half-cocked now, he'll just play the victim. He'll tell Gemma and her family you're losing your mind. If he gets scared, he'll dump that Metrotech in the Willamette River, and you'll be stuck with a 15 grand debt you can't prove you didn't sign for. What am I supposed to do? Just sit here while he ruins me? You find the paper trail, Thad. Payday loans leave digital breadcrumbs, but that Metrotech is physical. If he stole it, he had to move it. He needs cash, and he needs it fast. Check the pawn shops. Start with the shady ones near the docks, Finch's place. If you find that machine, you find the proof. But keep your head down. Don't let him know you're looking. I hung up the phone. The house was dead quiet now. An hour later, the pipes in the basement began to rattle. That meant the shower was running upstairs. Barnaby was getting ready for his dinner with Gemma's father. I stood up, ignoring the throbbing needle in my leg, and slipped out of my room. Walking into Barnaby's room felt like trespassing in a stranger's house. It was too clean. The air smelled of sandalwood and expensive hair gel. On his dresser sat a row of designer watches I'd never seen before, their silver faces catching the dim light from the window. I started with his desk. I pulled open the top drawer. Just bank statements, folders with corporate logos, and glossy brochures for luxury apartments in the Pearl District. Nothing about loans, nothing about pawn shops. The shower was still running, the rhythmic thud of the old water pump echoing through the floorboards. I bent down, my bad leg screaming in protest, and looked under his bed. Nothing but shoeboxes. I was about to leave when my eyes caught the small stainless steel trash can beside his nightstand. It was empty, a fresh black plastic liner tucked neatly around the rim. But the liner was sitting slightly crooked. I reached down and pulled the plastic bag out. At the very bottom of the metal bin, underneath the liner, was a small, tightly crumpled ball of yellow paper. My fingers were clumsy as I smoothed it out under the soft glow of his bedside lamp. It was a pawn ticket. Finch & Co., Golden Pawn, 1104 Front Street. The date was September 15th. The item description was written in a messy, hurried scrawl, 1 Metrotech UT99281X ultrasonic locator. Condition: used. My breath hitched in my throat. The ticket showed an payout of $6,000. $6,000 for a $12,000 machine that was my entire life. But it was the bottom of the ticket that made the blood run cold in my veins. There was a signature line, bold dark ink, Thaddeus Vance. I stared at my own name. It looked like my handwriting. At a glance, anyone would have sworn I wrote it, but I didn't. I spent 4 years in vocational school learning mechanical drafting back in the 70s. They taught us how to write with a T-square and a technical pen. You don't just scribble, you learn muscle memory. When I write a capital T, my hand moves straight down, then across. The top bar always has a clean, hard 90-degree stop. It's a block. It's a habit of 40 years. This T on the yellow paper didn't stop. The top bar swept upward, curling at the end like a wave. It was Barnaby's signature. He'd done it 1,000 times on his own school permission slips when he was a kid, trying to get out of class. He'd practiced my hand until he thought he had it perfect. But he didn't know about the drafting line. He didn't know about the mechanical stop. My hands started to shake. The yellow ticket felt heavier than a lead pipe. He didn't just steal my machine. He signed my name to the theft. He made me the criminal. Suddenly, the plumbing in the walls went quiet. The rhythmic thudding of the water pump cut out. I froze, my heart slamming against my ribs. Heavy footsteps moved down the hallway, wet feet squeaking against the hardwood floor. I scrambled to fold the yellow paper, my fingers slipping, my bad leg locking up with a fierce, blinding spasm that almost brought me to my knees. I gasped, clutching the edge of the nightstand to keep from falling. The bedroom door swung open. Barnaby stood in the doorway, a white towel draped around his damp neck. He was wearing his boxers, his skin still steaming from the hot water. But his face wasn't relaxed. His eyes were wide, bloodshot, and frantic. In his right hand, his knuckles were white around the heavy red steel handle of my ridged 15, a pipe cutter. The hardened cutting wheel gleamed dull in the lamplight. He didn't look like a banker anymore. He looked like an animal cornered in a dark alley. His gaze slid from my face down to my hands and locked onto the yellow slip of paper I was desperately trying to shove into my pocket. "What the hell are you doing in my room, Dad? What the hell are you doing in my room, Dad?" Barnaby's voice was sharp, cutting through the damp air of the bedroom like a rusty blade. He stepped into the room, his wet hair dripping onto his bare shoulders. In his right hand, his knuckles were white around the heavy red steel handle of my rigid 15A pipe cutter. The hardened cutting wheel caught the dim light, gleaming dull and cold. I looked at the tool, then at his face. My heart was pounding, a heavy, suffocating beat against my ribs. But 40 years of fixing high-pressure steam lines teaches you to stay still when the pressure rises. If you panic, you get scaled to death. I slowly let my hand drop from my pocket, leaving the yellow slip of paper hidden inside the fabric. I forced my face to go blank, letting my shoulders slump. I had to play the old tired man, the man he thought I was. "Your laundry, Barnaby," I said, my voice coming out as a low, gravelly rasp. "I was just looking for your dirty shirts. I wanted to get a load of wash going before my night shift. The basket was empty." Barnaby didn't move. He stood there, his eyes darting from my face down to my pockets, then back up again. He was breathing hard, his chest heaving. The arrogance of his 27 years was fighting with his fear. He couldn't imagine that his old, grease-stained father could ever see through him. He thought I was just a relic from a simpler, dumber time. "I told you to stay out of my room," he spat, tossing the heavy pipe cutter onto his desk. It hit a stack of shiny brochures for luxury apartments in the Pearl District with a loud, metallic thud. "You're getting too damn nosy lately, Dad. It's irritating. Just stick to your plumbing and leave my stuff alone." "I was only trying to help, son," I mumbled, keeping my eyes on the floor. "Yeah, well, don't. Go take your pills or something. Your leg is looking worse anyway. It's making me sick just looking at you." He turned his back on me, grabbing a clean shirt from his closet. I didn't say another word. I turned, dragging my splayed right foot, and hobbled back down the hallway to my bedroom. I locked the door, sank onto the edge of my mattress, and finally let out the breath I'd been holding. My hands were shaking so hard, I could barely pull the yellow pawn ticket out of my pocket. The next morning, the Portland fog was hanging low and heavy over the Willamette River. It was the kind of cold, damp day that made every joint in my body scream, but the anger inside me was keeping me upright. I got into my beat-up Ford F-150 and drove down to the industrial district, where the warehouses were stained with rust and soot. Rod Miller's office was located above a diesel repair shop. The smell of oil, diesel exhaust, and stale coffee always hit you the moment you opened the door. Rod was sitting behind a dented metal desk, his bad knee propped up on a plastic milk crate. He looked up as I limped in, his brow furrowing. "You look like hell, Thad," Rod said, sliding a ceramic mug of black coffee across the desk. "Sit down before you collapse." I didn't sit. I walked straight to the desk, pulled the yellow pawn ticket from my shirt pocket, and laid it flat on the metal surface. Beside it, I placed the blue folder containing my original 2018 purchase invoice for the Metrotech UT99281X. "He did it, Rod," I said, my voice flat. "Barnaby stole my machine. He pawned it at Finch's place on Front Street." Rod picked up the ticket, squinting through his thick reading glasses. He rubbed his jaw, his eyes scanning the crumpled yellow paper. "Harlan Finch," Rod muttered, shaking his head. "That sleazebag has been fencing stolen construction gear since the 90s. He knows a hot rig when he sees one. But look at this signature, Thad. Finch is smart. He's got your name right here on the line. He'll swear up and down you walked into his shop yourself and signed the paper." "I didn't sign it," I said, pointing a grease-stained finger at the bottom of the slip. "Look at the capital T, Rod. Look at the invoice from 2018. I spent 4 years in vocational school learning mechanical drafting. They teach you how to write with a T-square. You learn muscle memory. A straight downstroke, then a flat bar with a hard stop. It's a 90-degree block. But look at the ticket. See how the top bar swoops. It curls at the end like a wave. That's Barnaby's hand. He's been copying my signature since he was a kid trying to get out of detention." Rod leaned back in his chair, the old metal groaning under his weight. He took a slow sip of his coffee. I believe you, Thad. But a DA isn't going to prosecute a kid based on a swooping letter T. We need professional backing. Rod picked up his desk phone and dialed a number. 20 minutes later, a retired forensic document examiner named Marcus joined us. He was a small, quiet man who carried a leather case filled with magnifying lamps and a digital microscope. He didn't ask questions. He just laid my old tax returns, the invoice, and the pawn ticket side by side under his lens. For 10 minutes, the room was dead quiet, save for the rumble of a diesel engine from the shop below. Marcus adjusted his lenses, his face inches from the paper. The stroke pressure is all wrong, Marcus finally said, not looking up. An older man who works with heavy tools has a distinct, heavy drag on the paper. This signature is fast. It's a drawing, not writing. Someone traced your hand, Thad. It's a 98% match in style, but the velocity of the stroke is a dead giveaway. It's a forgery. Can you put that in a certified report? Rod asked. I'll have it on your desk by tomorrow morning, Marcus said, packing his gear. But Thad, whoever did this knew what they were doing. They wanted to make sure you couldn't easily dispute it without a fight. After Marcus left, I looked at Rod. Is that enough to get my machine back? It's enough to start a fire, Rod said, leaning forward. But Finch isn't going to just hand it over. If he gets wind that the police are sniffing around, that $12,000 Metrotech is going to end up at the bottom of the Willamette. We have to be smart. We need to know what Barnaby's next move is. I knew where Barnaby was going to be at noon. He had mentioned a lunch meeting near the Burnside Bridge. I drove my truck down to the riverfront, parking a block away from a quiet grey cafe under a green awning. The wind coming off the water was freezing, carrying the smell of wet creosote and rotting wood. I stayed in the shadow of an old brick warehouse, my collar turned up, watching through the mist. Barnaby was sitting at an outdoor table. He was wearing his new Hugo Boss suit, but he looked small in it. He was sweating despite the cold. Two men in heavy leather jackets were standing over him. One of them had a thick neck and a faded tattoo creeping up his jawline. He was leaning down, tapping two fingers hard against Barnaby's chest. It was the exact same gesture Barnaby had used on me. I don't give a damn about your bank bonuses, kid, the thick-necked man growled, his voice carrying clearly over the rumble of the river. October 15th. That's the hard stop. $45,000. Or we start taking things you can't replace. Your pretty little fiancée, maybe. Or your hands. Barnaby looked terrified. He was shaking so hard he could barely keep his hands flat on the table. I'm getting the money, Barnaby stammered, his voice high and thin. I swear. My dad, he's got the house in northeast Portland. It's worth at least $300,000. I'm getting him to sign the deed over to me this week. I just need a few more days to get the papers signed. October 15th, the man repeated, leaning in until his face was inches from Barnaby's. Not a day later. If we don't see the cash, we come for the house, and we come for you. They turned and walked away, disappearing into the grey fog. Barnaby sat there alone, his head in his hands, his shoulders shaking. I stood in the cold shadow of the warehouse, my bad leg aching so badly I had to lean against the brick wall to keep from falling. My own son. The boy I had protected, the boy I had worked myself to the bone for. He was ready to throw me out on the street, to steal the home his mother and I had built, just to pay off his gambling debts. I didn't go to him. I didn't scream. I just turned around, dragged my swollen leg back to my truck, and drove home in the rain. By midnight, the house was dark and silent. The rain was drumming a steady, heavy beat against my bedroom window. I lay awake, staring at the cracked plaster of the ceiling, the throbbing pain in my calf, a constant, sickening reminder of my own failing body. Then I heard it, a faint, metallic click from the living room. It was a sound I knew by heart, the heavy steel tumblers of my personal safe aligning. I slid out of bed, moving without a sound, ignoring the agony in my knee. I pressed my back against the hallway wall, creeping forward until I could see through the narrow crack of my bedroom door. A single beam of a flashlight was cutting through the darkness of the living room. Barnaby was kneeling on the floor in front of the hallway closet, where my safe was hidden behind the winter coats. He had my leather wallet in his lap, the spare key glinting in his fingers. He had stolen it from my dresser while I was asleep. He inserted the key. The safe door creaked open. He reached inside, his hands scrambling frantically through my tax records, looking for the deed to the house. And then his flashlight beam caught my reflection in the glass of the hallway mirror. He stopped dead. Slowly, the beam of the flashlight turned, shining directly into my eyes. "Dad," he whispered, his voice shaking in the dark. "Dad," he whispered, his voice shaking in the dark. I blinked against the blinding glare of the flashlight, shielding my eyes with a trembling hand. My bad leg was burning, a fierce, hot cramp clawing at my calf. I let my shoulder lean heavily against the doorframe, putting on the face of an old, broken plumber who was halfway to the grave. "Barnaby? What time is it?" I slurred the words just a bit, letting my voice sound thick and heavy with the sleep-fed pills I hadn't actually taken. He lowered the beam, but only slightly, keeping it aimed directly at my chest. I could hear his rapid, shallow breathing. The key to my safe was still clutched in his wet palm. "What are you doing up, Dad?" "The pump," I mumbled, rubbing my forehead, squinting in the dim light. I thought I heard the basement water pump rattling. Is it flooding?" "My leg. I can't get down those stairs if it's flooding, Barnaby." Barnaby let out a slow, shaky breath. I could practically hear the gears turning in his head, deciding whether to run or lie. He chose the lie. No flood. "Go back to bed, Dad. What are you looking for in the coats then?" "I dropped my watch," he said, his voice quickly regaining that smooth, dismissive edge he used on clients at the bank. "The gold one Gemma got me. Thought it slipped into one of the winter coat pockets. Go back to sleep. You're confused." "Right," I muttered, turning around slowly, letting my foot drag heavily on the old oak floorboards. "Confused. The pills. They make everything foggy." I went back to my room and closed the door. In the dark, I lay on my back, staring at the shadow of the maple tree dancing on the ceiling. I knew what was in that safe. Just old tax forms and utility bills. The real deed to this house was sitting in a fireproof cabinet at Rod Miller's office, locked behind 2 deadbolts and a legal shield. Barnaby was hunting for a shadow, but he was getting desperate, and a desperate boy with a fancy suit is a dangerous thing. The sun didn't really rise on October 14th. The fog just turned a lighter shade of grey, hanging thick and damp over the yard. I limped into the kitchen at 7. Barnaby was already at the table. He hadn't slept a wink. The dark circles under his eyes looked like bruises against his pale skin, and his hair was unwashed, sticking up in messy tufts. On the table between us sat a single sheet of paper, printed on heavy bond. He didn't offer me juice. He didn't ask how my leg was. He just slid the paper across the laminate, tapping his gold pen against the table. "I need you to sign this, Dad." I picked up my coffee mug, taking a slow sip. The heat was good for my hands, which were stiff from the damp cold. I looked down at the document, quitclaim deed. It was a clean transfer. If I signed it, Thaddeus Vance no longer owned the timber house on northeast Portland. Barnaby Vance did. "What's this?" I asked, keeping my voice quiet even. "It's for your own good," he said, his fingers twitching on the table. "With your leg, you can't keep up with the maintenance here. The roof needs work. The plumbing is shot. If we transfer the title to my name, I can use my banking leverage to refinance, get a home equity line, and pay for your surgery. We can move you into a nice managed care facility over in Beaverton. No more stairs. Managed care. A home for old plumbers who couldn't crawl under sinks anymore." "It's a big decision, Barnaby," I said, looking out the window. "Your mother and I built that back deck ourselves. We planted that maple out front. Mom is gone, Dad." He slammed his palm onto the table, the gold pen rattling against the wood. And you're barely holding on. You think you can keep doing night shifts at 60. You're going to kill yourself in some rich guy's crawl space. Just sign the paper. Let me handle the finances. I'm a risk analyst, remember? I looked at the signature line at the bottom. My name was already typed there, waiting for my hand to make the ink official. My leg is screaming today, son, I said softly, rubbing my calf. The pain, it gets up into my hip when the rain comes. My head is cloudy. I can barely read the small print. Let me look at it tonight. I'll sign it in the morning when my eyes are clear. Barnaby leaned forward, his eyes wild, searching my face for any sign of a trap. But all he saw was an old, broken third-ent nook who could barely walk. Tomorrow morning, he said, his voice dropping into a harsh, cold threat. We don't have time to play around, Dad. The bank, the title company needs this locked in by noon tomorrow. If you don't sign, I can't help you. And if I can't help you, you're on your own. I understand, I said. 2 hours later, I was sitting in a sterile fluorescent-lit interview room at the Portland Police Department. My truck was parked 3 blocks away, hidden behind an old grain elevator. Detective Ross was a solid woman with tired eyes and a no-nonsense manner. She sat opposite me, reviewing the heavy manila folder Rod Miller had helped me assemble. On the left side was my original Metrotech invoice, complete with the serial number and my drafting signature from 2018. On the right was Marcus's forensic handwriting report and the copies of the payday loan statements showing the $15,000 debt. This handwriting report is thorough, Detective Ross said, tapping the document with her pen. And the serial number on your leak detector is a direct match to the pawn ticket at Finch & Co. But, Thaddeus, you realize what happens if we move forward with this? He's my son, I said. My voice didn't shake, but it felt like dry sand in my throat. I know. If we arrest Harlan Finch for receiving stolen property, he's going to roll on your boy to save his own skin. Barnaby will face charges of grand larceny, identity theft, and bank fraud. He won't just lose his banking license, he'll go to federal prison. I looked down at my hands. The grease was worked deep into the creases of my skin, permanent black lines that 40 years of soap couldn't wash away. I had earned every cent, every shingle of my house, with these hands, and I had used them to feed the boy who was ready to let me rot in a managed care home. He cut my lock, I said quietly. He signed my name to a crime. He has to learn where the line is, detective. If I don't show him, the world will show him with a bullet. Ross sighed, leaning back. Finch is expecting Barnaby to bring the signed property deed tomorrow morning at 9. Finch is going to give him the remaining cash from the payday loan structure once the title transfer is verified. We'll have undercover officers inside the shop and 2 units in the alley. I'll be there, I said. You don't have to be, Thad. We can handle this without you. No, I said, looking her in the eye. It's my machine. It's my name. I'm going. October 15th, 5 in the morning. The rain was back, heavier this time, throwing thick sheets of water against the kitchen window. The house was freezing. Barnaby's room was silent. He had gone out late last night and hadn't come back. I sat at the kitchen table, my boots laced up tight, my canvas jacket draped over the back of the chair. My right leg was twice its normal size, the skin hot and taut like a drum. I had the gold pen in my hand, but I wasn't signing the quitclaim deed. I was just staring at it. Suddenly my phone vibrated against the wood. It wasn't a call. It was a text message from a blocked number. I tapped the screen. An image loaded. It was a photo of my house, taken from across the street. The yellow porch light was on, cutting through the thick Portland fog, making the old timber siding look wet and frail. Under the photo, there was a message. Sign the paper, old man, or this house burns to the ground with your tools in it by tonight. Barnaby won't be there to save you. My breath hitched. I stood up too fast, my bad leg giving out completely. I hit the linoleum floor hard, the kitchen table shaking as I grabbed the edge, my phone clutched in my hand. The rain kept drumming on the roof. But all I could hear was the racing beat of my own heart in the empty house. The windshield wipers of my old Ford F-150 were slapping a tired rhythm against the glass, barely clearing the thick Portland rain. My right leg felt like a swollen log of solid lead, throbbing so hard I could feel the heat radiating through my jeans. On the bench seat beside me, the text message with the photo of my house was still open on my phone. "Sign the paper, old man, or this house burns." Rod Miller reached over from the passenger seat, his heavy hand resting on my shoulder. "You don't have to go in there alone, Thad. Detective Ross and her guys are already in position in the alley. We can just let them sweep the place." I stared through the fogged-up window at the rusty sign of Finch & Co., Gold and Pawn. "No," I said, my voice dry. "He's my boy, Rod. I brought him into this world. I'm going to be the one to look him in the eye when it ends." I gripped the door handle, took a deep breath that tasted like wet copper, and squeezed out of the cab. Every step onto the gravel felt like driving a rusty nail into my knee, but I didn't let myself limp. Not today. The brass bell above the pawn shop door let out a weak, tinny chime as I pushed it open. The air inside was thick, smelling of dust, cheap gun oil, and 40 years of other people's bad luck. Harlan Finch was sitting behind a thick glass counter, grease shining on his bald head. He looked up, his yellow teeth showing in a mock grin that didn't reach his squinting eyes. "Well, look what the rain dragged in," Finch said, leaning forward. "Thaddeus Vance. Didn't expect to see you down this way. Usually, it's the kid doing the running around." "I'm here for my machine, Finch," I said. My voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of 40 years of hard labor. Finch's grin didn't falter, but his hand slid slowly under the counter. "I don't know what you're talking about, old man. This is a licensed establishment. We don't keep track of every rusty pipe or wrench." The door to the back room clicked open. Barnaby stepped out. He was still wearing that $3,000 Hugo Boss suit, but it looked like a shroud on him now. His face was the color of a wet sidewalk, his eyes darting frantically from me to the front window. In his hand he was clutching the quitclaim deed to my house. The paper was already damp from his sweaty palms. "Dad," Barnaby said, his voice high and paper thin, "what are you doing here?" I told you I'd handle this. You just need to sign the transfer. Finch has the equity release ready. We can get your leg fixed today." "Why are you making this so hard?" "Is that what you told Gemma?" I asked, looking him dead in the eye. "That you were selling the house to save your old man's leg?" Barnaby flinched, stepping back toward the counter. "It's the only way, Dad. You don't understand the kind of pressure I'm under. These people, they don't play. If I don't clear the 45 grand by noon, they're going to break my hands. They're going to ruin my life. What good is an old wooden house in northeast Portland if your only son is lying in a ditch?" "You stole my Metrotech, Barnaby," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "You signed my name to the pawn ticket." "I was going to buy it back," he screamed, his polished corporate facade completely cracking. "I was just using it as leverage. Finch was helping me out. It was a short-term liquidity bridge, Dad. That's how finance works." "That's not finance, kid," Finch chimed in, his voice cold and dry. "That's a signed agreement. I got Thaddeus Vance's signature right here on the ledger. Everything is legal and above board. If you got a family dispute, take it outside." I reached into my canvas jacket, pulled out the blue folder, and laid the original 2018 purchase invoice flat on the glass counter. "I don't sign my name with a swoop, Finch," I said. "I sign it with a 90-degree block. Muscle memory from vocational school drafting. That pawn ticket has a forged signature, and you knew it the second you took the machine." Finch's face hardened. His hand stayed under the counter. "You're throwing wild accusations around, old man. I suggest you pack up your little folders and get the hell out of my shop before I call the cops." "You don't have to," a voice behind me said. The front door chimed again. Rod Miller walked in, his retired detective badge catching the fluorescent light. Behind him, 2 plainclothes officers from the Portland Police Department blocked the exit, their hands resting on their hips. "Harlan Finch," Rod said, his voice booming in the tight space. "Step away from the counter. Keep your hands where we can see them." Finch's jaw tightened. He slowly brought his hands up, his eyes turning to ice. "This is harassment, Miller. I got a valid ID on file for that transaction. You got a forged document and a stolen $12,000 piece of utility equipment," one of the officers said, stepping behind the counter. "Bring out the Metrotech case from the back." Barnaby's knees buckled. He slid down the side of the glass counter, his expensive suit dragging against the dusty floor until he was sitting on his heels. "Dad, please," he whimpered, the tears finally spilling over his pale cheeks. "Please don't do this. Gemma, her family. If I get arrested, they'll call off the wedding. I'll lose my job at the bank. I'll go to prison. Dad, I'm your only son. You can't let them take me." I looked down at him. My heart felt like it was being squeezed in a vice, but my face remained steel. "You should have thought about that before you cut my lock, Barnaby. You should have thought about that when you threatened to burn my house down." The officer walked out of the back room, carrying the heavy black leather case. He laid it on the counter and popped the metal latches. The red foam lining was intact. The grey digital display of the Metrotech gleamed under the shop lights. "Verify it, Thaddeus," the officer said. I reached out, my fingers tracing the cold metal body of the machine. "Finch will say he bought it from someone who looked like me," I said, "but he didn't check the battery compartment." I pressed the plastic tabs on the side, popping the battery hatch open inside. Etched deep into the grey plastic frame with a fine laser tip were the small, neat letters, T, V 1991. "Thaddeus Vance." 1991, I said, looking at Finch. "The year I started my own business, the year Barnaby was born. I mark all my tools this way." Finch didn't say a word. He just closed his eyes and let out a long, slow sigh. "Barnaby Vance," the officer said, stepping toward my son and pulling a pair of steel cuffs from his belt. "You're under arrest for grand larceny, identity theft, and bank fraud. Hands behind your back." "Dad! Dad, please! Look at me!" Barnaby sobbed as the metal clicked around his wrists. "Don't do this to me! I'm sorry!" "I'm sorry." I didn't look at him. I couldn't. I picked up the Metrotech case, my hand trembling under the weight, and walked out into the rain. A week later, the auction sign went up on the front lawn of the Northeast Portland house. To clear the payday loans and the legal costs associated with the fraud, the timber house had to go. I packed my wrenches, my copper cutters, and my Metrotech into the back of my truck and drove away without looking back. Now, I live in a 15-square-foot room near the industrial docks. The plaster is peeling, and the train horns keep me awake at night. My right leg still aches, a constant, dull reminder of the surgery I couldn't afford. But every morning, I wake up at 5, pour my black coffee, and look at my tools resting neatly in the corner. If 40 years of plumbing has taught me anything, it's that you can't build a life on a cracked foundation. You can patch a leak with tape for a little while, but eventually, the pressure will always find the truth. It's better to let the whole pipe burst and build it back clean, even if you have to start from the ground up. I want to say a sincere thank you to all of you who have stuck with me through this painful journey. Your support has been the only thing keeping me upright in this dark room. If this story touched your heart, or if you believe that a man's dignity is worth more than any house, please hit that subscribe button and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Let me know what you would have done in my shoes in the comments below. Stay strong, and I'll see you in the next chapter.